Hey team, you're about to experience my interview with Chris McCollum. This guy has probably forgotten more about B2B e-commerce than the rest of us will ever know. He's been working in the space since the very earliest days of IBM Websphere Commerce, and he helped to develop that early B2B functionality in that platform. Listen in as we walk down the memory lane of B2B e-commerce and how Websphere even came into existence in the first place. Super interesting story. Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I have an amazing guest lined up for you today. He's been in the e-commerce game for a very long time, even longer than me, and I consider myself getting up there in years now myself, but he's been in e-commerce even longer than me. Chris McCollum, welcome to the podcast. It's awesome to have you along for the ride today.
Thank you. Been looking forward to it.
Me too. Look, I actually discovered you through LinkedIn when I was trying to connect with people who had B2B e-commerce experience in their background. And the reason that I did that is because I've set up this new sub-series of the podcast, which is dedicated to nothing but talking about really B2B e-commerce. And that's talking about it through the lens of consultants, people experienced like yourself, vendors, merchant stories, agencies, pretty much everything from the B2B perspective. And I have seen a dearth, an actual massive lack of content dedicated to talking about B2B e-commerce. There's lots of conversations about direct-to-consumer and B2C and merchandising and personalization and everything else. But B2B e-commerce is such a narrow niche, and e-commerce in general is a niche, but then you've got B2B e-commerce as a sub-niche underneath that. And then when you break out people that are working with punch-outs and EDI and B2B e-commerce, it's a really niche subject. And you were telling me off air that you were actually part of the engineering team that helped to build the first generation of IBM Websphere Commerce. So maybe you can start there with your story.
Okay. Websphere Commerce came out in 1999 as a product called net.commerce. It was a C+ based application. It was originally developed for, they said, the 1998 Atlanta Olympics. IBM used to do all the computing, donated all the computing resources to all the Olympic Games for 20, 30 years. I don't know how long time. So it was built to run an e-commerce site for the Atlanta Olympics. And then after the Olympics were over, somebody was smart enough to have the idea, hey, we ought to repackage this and sell it as an application. It was always at IBM kind of the redheaded stepchild because IBM was middleware, server-based stuff, very few, if any, end-user, customer-facing applications. So it stuck out on its own for a long time until they finally decided that we don't want to do this anymore.
And that's when they got acquired by HCL, right?
IBM sold Websphere Commerce. The whole team was based out of Toronto, was in IBM's Markham labs, and Toronto moved across the street and became HCL employees. So the only thing that changed is that 3 letters from IBM to HCL. Other than that, it's business as usual, pretty much for them.
Wow. And at that time, obviously, that was designed specifically to be almost like it was obviously meant to be a merch site for merchandise for the Olympics. And that was, in a sense, a direct-to-consumer model. But pretty rapidly thereafter, IBM added B2B functionality to Websphere, and it became one of the most popular B2B e-com platforms pretty early on, too. It predated a lot of the Oracle stuff, a lot of the other enterprise e-commerce stuff. It was one of the earliest players in the e-commerce space, as I understand it. Now, this is even before my time, but as I understand it.
If you look back in the old days, it was in net.commerce, and version 2 was when the first publicly announced. Then it was version 3. Then they came out with, they rebranded it with, it was Websphere, because at the time Websphere application server was doing well in the market. It was about version 2.5 of Websphere. And so they decided anything with the name Websphere on it was going to do better. Because, hey, it's selling. So it became Websphere Commerce Suite.
Wow. And this was long, long before the cloud, the
2000,
term cloud even came along.
there
So this
was,
was all on-premise technology.
oh yeah. They even came out with I don't want to say cheap, but the problem that they had with this, IBM was not a consumer based or a company. IBM sold to companies, big companies, to help big companies build systems for themselves. They did not sell to mom and pop stores. I worked in global services, IBM Global Services for a while, and pretty much if a deal was less than say $3 to $5 million, it went to a business partner. It was too little to worry about.
And they would dish it off to a partner,
They
but I
would
guess
dish it
maybe
to a partner.
then I guess
Uh,
IBM must have thought to themselves at the time, if we're selling this high-powered enterprise e-commerce application, then that will by definition help us sell more IBM hardware, right? Because it's got to be
well,
self-hosted.
it was originally set up as a toolkit for global services to help sell services and hardware. And the software licensing was generally given away for free. But
It was a lost leader, so to speak, to get them into the hardware and services.
What they wanted was, we want somebody to sign up. So yeah, buy a whole rack of servers and a room full of consultants for the next 10 to 15 years and doing great. And that was so the product wasn't made to say a turnkey solution, say like Shopify is today, the Magento, a lot of these where somebody with a mom and pop with no IT support, they can just get online, create their catalog, upload their catalog from a spreadsheet, click a few options, and they're ready to go. It was never really meant to be that. They targeted the big companies, big retailers. Dillard's, I worked on Dillard's for a while. Target, it was a Target, Home Depot, Kohl's, lots of your big name retailers. So these guys were doing biggest like Hewlett Packard. So they're doing $1 billion plus a year revenue on the sites.
And so spending $1 million a year, or $2 million a year, or $5 million a year, or $20 million a year with IBM is a drop in the bucket.
To go from because hopefully it's going to take it from $1 billion to $1.5 billion, or $2 billion, $3 billion. So yeah, that's the market they were going after. A while they came up with a smaller, let's say dumbed down version that didn't sell very well at all, because all they did was take some functionality, turned off some functionality, say, all right, we'll give you this for $25,000. But it still needed server, it needed a box, it was an on-prem solution at the time. So that was never going to work.
And everything else was on-prem. The reality is that the entire commerce world at that point was still on-prem. And when it came to developing additional functionality for the platform, I'm guessing that was very much project-led. If it required pretty much IBM professional services to implement the solution and customize it for a specific merchant, a lot of the functionality that was vertical specific, because if you're talking about Dillard's, if you're talking about grocery, you're talking some very highly specialized verticals that need some really highly customized functionality. That's IBM's bread and butter to customize, which is what they did. And then I guess they roll that back into the core. And then the next time that they meet another grocery retailer, it becomes a whole lot easier to roll it out for them, because now you've brought in a whole bunch of grocery specific functionality into the platform, and the same for home improvement and all the rest.
We did the way IBM's contracts were written. Custom was not buying software. They were buying the right to use software that IBM produced. So IBM owned the rights to the customized code. So it could be resold down the line, and absolutely we did that quite a few times.
And when did they, if you can remember, when they started adding B2B functionality to the platform, was that in response to a specific large merchant?
5.4. It was, there was 4.0 was C+, and oh, by the way, you could add some Java front end, some JSPs on the front, as opposed, but if you read the fine print, it says was not recommended. Seriously. Then came version 4, then came version 5, which was the first fully rewrote application in Java. Didn't do very well. Then was 5.1. 5.1 was the first one, full Java-based solution that worked pretty well. It's still on-prem. 5.2 was B2B. And that was, they won a contract with, I believe the first one was Home Depot B2B site out of San Diego.
Yeah, I remember there was a lot of scuttlebutt in the industry. I remember there's a lot of scuttlebutt in the industry around Home Depot wanting to service the trade better, and they wanted to make that a significant part of their business to complement their consumer business. And it makes complete sense that, hey, they were already a behemoth at that stage, so money within reason was no object, and they needed a B2B platform to service the trade.
Yep. So customized function were added to the product targeting B2B. Big ones like RFQ process, and then then there was organization. That's the biggest, most complex part of the B2B function that was added, is because in B2C, your customer is an individual.
Yes.
In B2B, your customer is a business.
Yes.
So you
with
could
multiple
be
users.
Selling with multiple, so you could have 20 different departments within a business. You've got a hierarchy within that customer that you need to be able to manage and identify, because you have to be able to support approvals, cart limitations, product availability. So different departments could only buy a subset of products. Those
MOQs, price lists.
Yep. So all that's the B2B function. It started out because B2B used to be really boring front ends, but then Amazon came along and people got used to getting online and buying online. And I've had, over the last few years, several customers saying, I want an Amazon-like interface.
Of course, their last best experience becomes their next expectation.
Oh, yeah. I had a customer in Florida who IBM, it's a women's clothing catalog company. Our salesperson sold them. IBM will create a best-of-breed e-commerce site. So it was a fixed price contract. So it took me almost my entire allotment of hours to document what best-of-breed e-commerce site means. I would get a call from the guy to go upstairs to the guy on the customer side who's running the project, and he goes, I saw this on Lillian Vernon. It's really cool. Watch. I said, see how it works? I said, yeah, that's cool. He goes, I want ours to do that.
Of course. Then that gets added to the requirements, and that's what we call scope creep in our industry.
Well, first we had to figure out how the heck they did it and trying to reverse engineer that functionality into our own platform. Biggest site, B2B site I ever, it was for the Department of Defense called FedMall. It had we bought together catalogs from over 3,000 vendors, sell to mostly DoD, but also quite a few other agencies around the country, around the world actually. Topped out about 80 million SKUs in that database. So we had a guy who his job was loading catalog data. 24 by 7, constantly loading data, and constantly running Delta updates on the indices to try and keep performance, though it just wasn't horrible because the site was so gigantic, and it constantly changed.
And this was on Websphere.
It's on Websphere. This was it was on-prem. Navy was in called a FedRAMP network in the cloud in Navy, and out of a facility in West Virginia. Don't want to.
And this was an internal DoD developed platform. This was a bespoke, internally developed platform.
Yep. So I could tell you more about it, but then I'd have to kill you.
I love it. And do you remember what roughly year IBM came out with that 5.3 or 5.4 version of Websphere with B2B functionality, roughly?
2003 or 4. I'd have to look back.
Wow. And did IBM look to any competitors at that time that they aspired to be and said, this is how this system works and we like that functionality, so we're going to roll it into Websphere? Or was it always just simply based on that client's need and we're going to roll that into the core?
I couldn't tell you for sure. because I wasn't a part of that decision-making process. In most cases, yeah, it was they were farming global services projects for cool stuff that we built for clients. I'm sure there was some to some effect, but looking at competitors and trying to stay competitive in the market, we were generally through 2010-ish leading the market in most cases. There were a lot of other products, but we were by far the best B2B platform on the market, bar none. Yeah. And we had very comparable with all the B2C. There were things back. There was one, the early 2000s, Blue Martini was one that you probably haven't heard of because it's long gone now.
What about Oracle
Several
ATG? Was that considered a competitor at that point?
It wasn't Oracle at the time. It was just ATG.
Yeah.
Oracle bought them. Yeah, no, Oracle is where good software goes to die.
Yes.
It was a good product way back then. Yeah, I've had bad experiences with a lot of Oracle products.
Yeah, I just hope they don't kill off NetSuite, because I think NetSuite is an outstanding product, and I hope they don't kill that one.
Yeah, it was a very good product, but they buy a lot of stuff and then they don't know what to do with it, and it kind of lays around on the shelf. We had they bought Commerce 360, which was a point of sale platform, and it just disappeared after they bought them because they were based here in Austin. So I knew a lot of people who worked there, and a lot of people who worked there about 6 months after Oracle bought them started leaving because nothing was happening anymore.
Wow. And
I don't want to get
how
in
have
trouble
you
by
seen
Oracle people here?
It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me that B2B e-commerce, even for the smaller players, has become de rigueur, meaning that still today over 40% of B2B transactions in the United States, according to DC360 data, over 40%, somewhere in the neighborhood of 45% of transactions in B2B are still 100% manual. Now that is mostly at the SMB side of town. Obviously, for the big businesses, the big B2B suppliers, their vast majority of their transactions are EDI. So there's no self-service e-commerce required because they're supplying the big end of town, and those are all EDI integrations directly from ERP to ERP. Occasionally, there's a punch-out involved where a procurement department will need to have a punch-out integration with the supplier, and then they'll have their procurement list, and they'll go through a punch-out. But it seems to me that the biggest opportunity in B2B, especially to emerge over the last, say, 5 years, or let's say since COVID, is the small end of town B2B. And just as we've seen Shopify come in and revolutionize D2C e-commerce and make it accessible to everyone, it seems like the big end of town of B2B platforms, either they're coming down and offering more accessible platforms in terms of cost and complexity, but we're also getting a lot of new entrants into the market. And while the early 2000s was when the big end of town of B2B e-commerce kind of found its footing, that was never accessible to SMBs. And so I think what we're seeing now is a massive revolution in B2B e-commerce.
I don't know about massive, but yes, I agree with you. The biggest market's availability right now is still, and it was 10 years ago, I was telling IBM this, is cloud-based. I was actually AT&T. We built a multi-tenant cloud-based commerce application. Did it really nicely before AWS came out. It was all on VM. Problem was we were way ahead of our time, and our salespeople just could not properly sell it. They could not. People were scared. Oh, wait, you mean I'm going to put my data in the same
on your servers,
in the same database, that your other customers have? Everyone's hitting the same servers, the same set of servers, the same database, all this stuff. And what happens? So it was too new, too scary at the time. We sold one. Yankee Candle was the one customer.
Yankee Candle's a beast. I guess if you're going to only have one customer, that's a bloody good one to have.
We were down to, we almost got the Postal Service. We fought. It was about 6-month process. We were down to between us and one other company, and they undercut us on price at the last end, and we didn't get it, but almost got the U.S. Postal Service, which would have been very nice. But B2B, yes, small SMB market. Salesforce is probably one of my favorite ones now. They've rewritten their B2B product from what they bought it and then decided to redo the whole thing and to finally to make everything work together. Because the nice thing about Websphere Commerce was I can have B2B, B2C on the same storefront in different storefronts. I can have as many storefronts as I want. Everything's together, so I can have one catalog, and then each store I can say, all right, these products go here, these products go here, these products go here. That is a big selling point because it's a whole lot easier to manage than when Salesforce bought Demandware, and what was the name of the company that they bought, the B2B guys? I forget.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But they were two different products, and when they bought them, now they're all Salesforce, but wait, they don't talk to each other.
Totally different architectures, even the language.
Yep, neither of the commerce products would talk to, say, Service Cloud, Community Cloud, Sales, none of that stuff. So they've been...
Or even to Financial Force as the ERP.
Yeah. Yep, so it took them years to get to, but now it's all in a relatively well-integrated. So I can have a customer can be a B2B customer and a B2C customer at the same time. And because the big thing from a customer perspective is if I'm doing business with a company, I want to see all my business together in the same time and be able to track what I'm buying, when I'm buying, how I'm buying it, from whom I am buying it. And all that information needs to be integrated, even if I go in to a storefront and check out through a point of sale application. I want to see that too, because everybody now does reward points and groups and all this kind of stuff. So I want to make sure I'm getting all my kickbacks or all my miles or whatever it happens to be that you're throwing at people.
And my free shipping threshold and all the rest.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And my discounts and my tiered pricing, all that kind of fun stuff. I want to be able to see that. So some Shopify does, some B2B stuff. Not
very limited.
Not really. Another one, big commerce. So the problem is the big guys are trying to stretch their market downward.
Little guys are trying to go upwards.
Little guys are trying to go up, and it's difficult for both because the big guy making it easy enough for the little mom and pops who are working off of spreadsheets to be able to do it because they're not going to hire an IT staff. They don't want a DBA. They don't want an internet guy.
They don't even want to have an e-com manager.
No, most of them don't. Unless you get to be large. We did a job for a chain of car dealerships. So that was interesting.
Because then you've got to integrate with the DMS and suck out a whole bunch of data for e-com.
Oh, yeah. Oh, grocery stores. We did Safeway, which is now part of Albertsons, I think. The hardest one I ever did, it was Singular Wireless, which is now AT&T Wireless. All the things constantly change, but all the package options.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to
variants and sub options and combos and kits and
Yes, that was crazy.
Because you've got physical and virtual products, right? You've got the hardware and you've got the services, and some of those are delivered direct and some of those are by partners. So what a nightmare to even from an order management perspective, what a nightmare.
Yeah, and then you've got support. And you want to buy, then there's the purchasing. You're buying the phone, you're leasing the phone. You want a different lease. You're going to pay for it over 12 months. It's this probably over 24 months and all this stuff. That was a lot of nightmare into getting that to work properly.
Yeah, I worked on a very large project, very similar to what you're just describing for one of the largest telcos in the world when I was still living in New Zealand, and we were working on a very big project for a huge telco down there, a big mobile operator, and the very same thing there, because they've got a bunch of virtual SKUs is effectively what they've got. When you bundle things together, it generates a virtual SKU for all the different potential, and in some cases, there's literally millions of potential combinations when you talk about hardware, services, subscriptions, leases, and then obviously if somebody cancels early, for example, then there has to be a payoff of a certain device, or they've got to return the device. I mean, it's just when you think of even from a pure hardware perspective, say of a mobile phone, you've got the different colors, you've got the different RAM options, you've got the different, and then you've got the accessories that can come with it at the same time.
Oh yeah,
as
you're
part
really
of
pushing those. That's where the money. You want that stuff's gravy. You want to sell those things.
And then, of course, the order routing, because generally from a fulfillment perspective, they're from say, for example, a subscription side, that'll get routed oftentimes to a separate ERP or OMS separate to the hardware, which oftentimes that order then has to be forwarded to the local distributor of the hardware so that the distributor then ships it direct to the customer. And then you've got other services, like, for example, if you're buying home broadband as a bundle, then you've got the installer that's got to come out and they've got to get you hooked up for home broadband. Man, I tell you, telco from a B2B perspective, and oftentimes there will be, as you rightly pointed out, a B2B component and a B2C component buying through the same vendor. And you've got the end consumer that's going through a website, and they maybe want to buy a handset and a simple subscription for 2 years and get it subsidized. But then you've got B2B buyers that want to buy business broadband, home broadband, devices for all their staff, put them on plans. So they've got a group plan. I tell you, and then in many cases they'll offer a free upgrade program or for a slight fee. Basically, every 2 years, everybody can upgrade their hardware. And so then you've got to provide the ability for them to return the hardware and get the upgrade. So I tell you, telecommunications B2B sales in particular are one of the most complex industries I've ever seen. Are you a small or medium-sized wholesaler that currently processes your transactions manually? Or maybe you're a D2C merchant that is looking to expand and add a B2B e-commerce channel but don't know how? Well, if you're ready to take the next steps on your B2B merchant journey, check out mikata.cloud today to find out more about the e-commerce platform built from the ground up for small and medium B2B merchants. That's mikata.cloud, MIKATA.cloud.
Oh. I used to work for a company called MCI.
I remember MCI.
Name? Yeah, I was about 10 years doing data. I built a thing called the data division, all the internet services. One of the coolest things I ever did, I met a guy named Vint Cerf. He was the inventor of the internet.
Wow. Okay. Never heard of him.
Yeah. Google him. He worked for DARPA.
Of course, which is, of course, where the internet came from. It was a DARPA project. Mainly between education and government, of course, and defense.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. I met him. Yeah, I built order entry network provisioning applications for MCI, building their network out.
Because they were considered a baby bell at the time, weren't they?
No, they destroyed. They're the ones that broke up Bell. AT&T.
Okay.
Their MCI filed the original lawsuit that got AT&T broken up.
Aha. Okay. Yeah, I remember that they were a major player, but I didn't know that part of the story.
That's it. And then all the baby bells, because MCI was a long distance carrier. They didn't at the time, they didn't do local. So we got into data in the 90s, and then they made the mistake of management there. This is what killed the company, in my opinion, because it's now they sold off everything. There's part of it too, it's called Verizon Business. It's what's left of the old MCI. But they decided to go into, fiber was big, go into the local business and selling business lines, and they started spending billions of dollars building fiber rings around major cities in the U.S. And this is right after they decided they were going to buy a cell company and decided not to. And they were going into local hardwire service as opposed to cell. And
strategic mistake, a very big one.
A very big one.
Missed the mobile train. Whoops.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And now all AT&T is pretty much back in called AT&T again.
Yeah, I noticed
Verizon,
that too. I tell you, people are talking about how their AT&T plans. I'm in Mexico now, but a lot of people are saying AT&T is one of the best companies in the States to get your mobile through because they'll cover you all through North America at no extra charge. So Canada, United States, and Mexico, full mobile coverage. So everything's circular, right? Now, Do you
Yes,
remember back
indeed.
when because I can remember, and so I'm sure you remember, when the .com bust happened? I remember I was actually in a tennis club, and I remember being in their pro shop, and I was looking at a new tennis racket, and I remember them talking on the news. I remember it coming through the speakers, because at that point there was like Muzak or whatever it was, and it was being plumbed in, and it was just the radio or whatever it was, and then you could hear the news. I remember them talking about this massive crash, how this whole internet thing was potentially a fad, and how everybody was losing money. And I remember all that, and I remember the discussion and the scuttlebutt at the time. I knew that the internet was there to stay, even before this was way before e-commerce became mainstream. But even with my little understanding of it at the time, because my father, he originally owned a typewriter sales and service business. Then when typewriters were on the way out and word processors and computers started to become the big thing, and Eagle computers for business and all those things became the mainstream, then he shifted and he started up a computer sales and service company, and he was selling to businesses primarily. There was the home PC. There basically Radio Shack dealt with all that, and the smaller retail stores dealt with all that. But my dad was dealing with businesses, and so it's interesting to see that evolution from typewriters to computers, pre-internet, during the internet of the rollout, and then post-internet. But because IBM really brought out Websphere just before the .com bust, how did it affect everybody's feelings about e-commerce when the whole industry seemed to melt down simultaneously? Was everybody going, oh my God, are we even going to have a future for this whole e-commerce technology thing?
I don't recall. There was about a 8 to 12 month lull, let's say. And mostly it was the stock market is what crashed, and it was because people got really stupid and bidding up prices. And it is very stock market, like everything else, is cyclical. It happens all the time. People get excited, and people follow the money. And somebody bought, like Tesla. Tesla isn't making near as much money as their stock price
Would indicate.
would lead you to believe. Amazon for years wasn't making any money at all, and their stock price went crazy. So it's people, it's the bandwagon. Jump on the bandwagon. At some point in time, there is an adjustment.
Somebody's got to pay the piper.
Prices will get so high, and then people will go, "Oh crap! It's not going any higher. Time to get out." And people start getting out. The more people get out, the more people get out. And that it becomes a fad, and I got to get out. It's going down, and
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh yeah, and then it took up to a year before it started going back up again. But the usage of e-commerce, I don't think really went down, and it's been growing consistently through that period. I was IBM, we added additional capabilities. I think we started to innovate a little more in getting sophisticated marketing capabilities integrated into the application, where that didn't, the original product was, here's a catalog. We have a catalog, we have a cart. And you can take stuff, look at the catalog, put it in your cart, you can check out. That's it. That's what the first products were.
And were most people back then plugging that into an existing ERP or maybe an IBM product for the business and transactional processing?
There was no plugging in. Originally we'd file, pass it back to
flat file,
in the back.
send it.
Flat file, toss it over the fence, and hope somebody checked out.
Deals with it.
The integration came in a little bit in 5.4, the business mostly. We were the biggest integrator with SAP of any e-commerce, because back then SAP had a little piddly-poo storefront that they gave away for free.
They didn't have Hybris then.
No, they did not have Hybris then. So Hybris came up shortly after that and started doing quite well. Hybris bought them. IBM lost a lot of e-commerce business
to Hybris.
SAP was now pretty much giving away Hybris in order to get more SAP
business. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, because that's where
it's a lost leader. Like IBM was using WebSphere as a lost leader.
Yep. Yeah, we lost a lot of installations from that when Hybris got bought out by SAP and they finished the integrations. So integrations were always, the integrate comes after you get the product up and running. Okay, here's what we have to go out. First thing is a flat file, a dumb interface, and then you get them smarter. And then we had a middleware, a mitigation layer where we could talk directly, but say a commerce order looks like this. We send it to a file, we send it to a piece of software that turned it into an SAP order and sent then forwarded the request on so we could do quasi real-time integration with SAP. So that came a couple of later on down the road.
And then you had then effectively every major player like the IBMs and the SAPs of the world, they had their own universal serial bus that effectively became the middleware platform that tied all their applications together. And it made it easier for them to acquire new applications because they had their own middleware in-house that they could use to tie all these disparate applications together.
Now most of those are pretty much gone by the wayside. Now we have cloud, and 75% of the market's on AWS.
Yep. Even the quote-unquote on-prem applications are hosted by AWS now.
Oh, yeah. And logically speaking, and part of the reason why IBM is not in the commerce business, I think they took too long to go to the cloud.
To cloudify themselves.
Part of it was the sales reps. Sales reps did not want recurring rental revenue. They were busy. An e-commerce license is $500,000. So they're going to get 50,000 up front when the deal closes. And they don't, but when you go to the cloud, they're going to get so much a month, but then the customer can quit at the end of a year. And so they're not going to get that big bucks. They want the big payoff. And so salespeople fought that kind of licensing, pay as you go.
They fought that new business model.
Kind of thing. Oh, absolutely. With tooth and nail, they fought that business model. And that IBM was run by those people. So it took them far too long. They didn't. And then also, they like going to banks. We just had a bank. I worked on a bank last year, a project. We moved 375 applications off of servers, on-prem servers, into the cloud.
Wow. That's a massive migration.
Yeah. IBM was like selling hardware. It was easy. That was how they grew up. They wanted to keep selling hardware. So if everybody's in the cloud, then that hardware market is a whole lot smaller than it used to be.
And they seem to have never recovered. They seem to be a shadow of their former self even today.
They are indeed. It's sad because it's over 100-year-old company. You hate to see, but it was mismanaged in a lot of ways.
And the new breed of companies were cloud native from day one, and so there's no business model shift required.
No, we are all cloud. Yeah, so microservices, even on NoSQL databases. I had to learn Mongo. I grew up, when I was in school, IBM just come out with a new database called System R, which was the originator for DB2.
I was going to say, was that the progenitor of
That's how
DB2?
Long ago, yeah. Yes, indeed. That's how long ago. I've got 30 years of relational database experience, and now all of a sudden it's all documents and collections and objects. And why are you duplicating this data? You don't duplicate data. That's bad form. No, relational database. You got to learn. Unfortunately, you got to learn. Keep it up. So it's part of the interesting thing in this business is it never stops changing. So
I'm on the same page with you. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and the only constant is change. That's the only thing. And if you don't keep up, because I cut my originally on OS Commerce, and then in the Magento on-prem world, and then of course cloud became the thing, and then got into BigCommerce and Shopify and VTEX and all the other SaaS platforms. But that hasn't just happened to the e-commerce layer, the front-end layer. That's happened across PIM, CDP, point of sale, order management, CRM. It's happened across every single component within the commerce stack. It's expected now that the vast majority of that will be delivered via SaaS. And so it's been a massive change when you come from on-premise. Historically, you've worked with on-premise technology, and you need back-end developers and front-end developers, to where now the quote-unquote back-end development has taken the shape of custom apps, for example, a custom Shopify or a custom BigCommerce app, and custom system integrations. Oftentimes now even that's mediated by an iPaaS, so effectively you've got integration middleware that's also in the cloud. We've come full circle now on the whole application layer side of things, that now we've got these independent components that all need to be tied together by middleware. It's what's old is new again.
Oh, yeah. When I first got out of college, we wrote an accounts payable application for the company. It was all UNIVAC. It was on UNIVAC with mainframes, and we actually wrote accounts payable. And you don't see that. You don't see that happen today.
No, or that product would have been made a cloud product. That would have been a SaaS product.
Yeah, and it's they're accounting. You don't buy. Yeah. You don't go out and build. No one. Everyone thinks they do things. They're unique, but nobody is that unique.
No.
And it's so easy to build on, to customize, to add your little tweaks, and to get your uniqueness covered, but without having to go out and spend $2, $3, $4 million or whatever. And back in those days, it was 12 to 24 months to get a giant mainframe application from here's what we want to up and running.
Wow.
And
what
people,
I guess they just don't do it anymore. Yeah, that's not the way software is done.
No, if people can't get something running in 2 to 3 months, they start yelling at you. Even back when I started at IBM, 6 months to a year to come up with an e-commerce, a big high-end e-commerce solution. We'd take 12 months. Yeah. And now it's, if you're over 3 months, hit the road, we'll get somebody else.
And what do you think the future of B2B e-commerce looks like? What if we were to look into your crystal ball based on your many years of experience looking backwards? If we look forwards, obviously AI is getting all the investment now. That's the next bubble to be blown. It was Web3 and VR and AR, and then that bubble burst, and now it's AI and machine learning. How do you see the future playing out for commerce in particular, with the advent of much more accessible AI with much more friendly UIs on the front of it, ChatGPT?
Yeah, I think as far as from a front-end perspective, there will be no difference between B2B, B2C. B2B people used to be, I'm bored, I've got a list of checklists, I need 10 of these, 50 of these, 100 of these. Now I go home, I order stuff on Amazon, I go to work, I want to do things the same way. So on the front end, and there are a lot of companies now who have the same, I can do B2B, B2C, same storefront, depend on how you log in.
Yep.
But the big difference is back end, is the organization. And then there's how you going to pay for it. Do you need, and because B2C is pretty much credit card, PayPal,
it's all prepaid,
Venmo, all stuff, where you've got financing capabilities and back-end systems for payment. But front end, there's really no real need to be different from between B2B, B2C on the front end. Because I want to see stuff on sale too.
Yeah.
Hey, B2B,
I want to get my trade pricing. I want to get I want to be able to see my MOQs in real time. I want to have an aggregated cart, and I want to have all the things that I get in my B2C experience, and even down to the point of B2B specific marketplaces now, the Fairs of the world and Amazon Business of the world. We want to be able to do business and transact through marketplaces just like we do in our personal life. But we still want to get our trade discounts, and we still want to get our trade deals, and we want to still have our credit terms, and we still want to have buy now, pay later, but we want it for B2B as well. And so that's why you have Credit Key, and you've got these other players that have come into the market, the balance payments of the world. You've got an entire fintech industry, because fintech for B2B has been legacy for so long that credit terms were just the norm, and it was always provided by the vendor, 30-day, 60-day, 90-day terms, whatever it might be. And effectively everything was post-paid. And so you would just place your order, it would just go into the ERP, and then that would get ticked off their credit balance and added to their credit balance. And nowadays they expect to be able to have a multitude of payment options when they go to checkout, as opposed to just being on account. And what I'm seeing, and I wonder if you're seeing the same, because B2B e-commerce experiences now are being more utilized in more of a customer acquisition way. It used to be the B2B account would originate in the ERP and be synced up to the e-commerce platform with all the login details, etc. Now the customer may originate actually through the e-commerce platform. And so the first time they order and the first time they create an account, maybe they only can pay via credit card, business credit card, for example. But then once they've completed that transaction and the sales rep reaches out to them, sets up trading terms and credit terms and all the rest, then all of a sudden now they can pay via credit card or they can pay on account, their choice, when they go to check out from the second order onwards. So I'm seeing a lot of this hybridization of the business models where you've got almost like a D2C-like business model, but you've also got the B2B-like business model, all wrapped up into one unified storefront experience. And that seems to become more than ever before. That's now the norm.
There is really no more line drawn. And here's the business side and here's the consumer side. That's pretty much gone away now, out of necessity. Salesforce is they finally got to where everything talks to each other, everything's integrated. And you got a customer manager. I can get online. I can see everything that customer does, everybody who works for that customer, who does what, where, and when, and how often, and how much money they make for us and they buy from us, what they're buying, how often they're buying it, so we can be, whether B2B, B2C, I want to generate, these guys have a big contract coming up. We got to let them know, hey, we got these widgets. We can give them to them for 20% below our competitor's price. Why don't we let them know that now? Same thing is, it's Memorial Day sale, furniture store. It's the same stuff. It's really all the same. It was artificially kept apart, but the technology has brought everything together. So all the systems now are at a point where everything can talk to each other in real time or near real time. So like you said before, in B2B, customers in ERP first, and then we get a customer, then we have to sync up customer list from back end to the front end. Now it's we create a customer. It can be created from anywhere, and then his
and synced everywhere.
Consciousness is spread everywhere. Yes.
Wow, Chris,
the more change, the more they stay the same.
That's exactly right. I couldn't agree with you more. I tell you, when you've seen this pattern play out 100 times before, and there's almost nothing new under the sun. You watch the new patterns play out very similar to the old patterns. Man, it's been such a joy walking down e-commerce memory lane with you, and you've got such a wealth of experience and knowledge. I've learned a ton of stuff that I never knew or heard before, and I knew this was going to be an interesting conversation. Now I'm at the point where I get to flip the script and I get to hand the microphone over to you, and you get to ask me one question, any question you like. It can be personal, it can be professional. Chris, what's your question for me today?
So what brought on this podcast? Tell me about the origins of the e-commerce edge.
Yeah, look, it really originally came out because I didn't see anybody in the podcast world creating the kind of content I wanted to listen to or the kind of content I wanted to consume around e-commerce. There was 10 to 20 popular e-commerce podcasts at the time because I really started doing this in earnest about 3 years ago. And there was plenty of podcasts out there about e-commerce, but they were almost exclusively focused on B2C, D2C, and they were almost exclusively focused on marketing, and they were focused on merchant stories. That was the prime focus of almost all the e-commerce podcasts out there. And I wanted to focus on more of the technical and operational side of e-commerce because that's the side that interests me the most, and that's the side that I've got the most background with. And because I'm not a marketer, I'm more of a technician, and I'm a senior solution architect, and so I'm helping people architect their data, their processes, their organizational design, and their technology, and do search and select for that and for the partners that will deliver it. Because that's my background, and because I've also run agencies, for me, I just didn't see anything out there that I wanted to consume, or very little. Let's put it that way. Not none, but very little. And I thought, why don't I make it happen then? Time to pull finger and actually create something that I think is a gap. And so I've been able to, it originally started out purely talking to SaaS, e-commerce, and omni-channel and digital retail tech vendors. That was one episode a week. And then I added the Mentoring Moments episode per week, which I do all my mentorship is free, and I do a lot of one-on-one and group mentorship programs. And I wanted to take the key learnings out of that and create a unique dedicated episode of just the mentorship learnings. And then the most recent episode that got added was the B2B episode, because I focus so heavily on the B2B side of e-commerce, and I work with so many B2B merchants, whether that's B2B merchants that want to add a D2C channel, D2C merchants that want to add a B2B channel, or B2B merchants that have never had e-commerce at all and are setting up for the first time, that there was even less content out there around B2B than there was around D2C, B2C. And so I thought, let's create it, let's make it, and let's have these conversations, and let's get the knowledge and experience out there in the market to make people better, to encourage everybody to lift their game. So that's how it came to be, really just scratching an itch and trying to put out content that I'd love to consume.
Mention one thing we didn't discuss as far as commerce goes. Use the term
What's that?
omni-channel. Use
Yeah.
the phrase omni-channel. I remember before, in the old days, 20 some odd years ago, it was just web channel. And then
Correct.
Apple came along. Then we had mobile. And back then, I remember we did Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble, when they first started doing e-commerce, they took all their warehouses and broke them in two. And they had a separate warehouse for their online store and separate warehouse for the bookstore. And never the two shall meet. And they wanted to keep the whole business separate because they weren't sure it was going to survive. And then the same came around. I remember we did some very annoying stuff at Target back when mobile phones started coming around, where you could get, I can get a GPS locator on where this customer happens to be and on their phone. And when they got the Target app, it would ding if you're close to a Target within X amount of miles, depending on different stores. You'd get a text that says, hey, you're nearby such and such Target on such and such street. We got 20% off this stuff. And then we even had some for a Safeway we built where you walked into the grocery store with the phone. It would text you to your phone that says, welcome to, we had a couple of stores actually that had big signs, but as somebody walked in, it would pop them up and says, welcome, Steve. How you doing today?
Wow.
So I usually buy apples, and we've got a new crop coming in over on aisle 2 kind of stuff. So it's been an interesting ride so far. A lot of stuff has changed. Now I got very annoyed now. My H-E-B store here in Texas they're getting rid of paper, the old-fashioned coupons. The only way to get a coupon, it's all you got to have the app on your phone, and you got to click on the coupon in your app, and then when you go out, when you check out, you show them your phone, and they can get your.
They scan the QR code, and then you get the discount.
Yes, yeah. So you don't get the discount if you don't have a smartphone. So they're assuming everybody has smartphones now, which is probably not a bad idea, but
it's probably not a assumption that is too often wrong.
No, but that just shows you how much things have changed in a very short period of time.
But yet remain the same, because that level of in-store personalization and welcoming and everything else, brands are still trying to execute on that today, and they're just doing it in slightly different ways. But that whole concept of merging the online offline experience, it's always been a thing like that. They may not have called it omni-channel. That may not have been the term that they used, but definitely trying to multi-channel initially. Correct.
Yes.
Multi-channel, I remember. And then we went to omni because we want them to have the same experience or as close to the same experience as possible online and off.
And any way the customer wants to get a hold of you should be consistent with every other way.
Wow. This has been an enlightening conversation, Chris. I have super enjoyed the chat. I really appreciate your time. This actually was more insightful, and I learned more than I even expected to. So I really appreciate, there's a few of us old dogs in the game still, and we're still trying to change the game. And I think, what I've found, and I don't know if you found the same, I love teams that have some young blood, but also have some old blood, because I think those of us that have been around the circuit a few times, we bring things to the table that the young guns will never see, that they'll just never see it coming. We can peek around corners that they haven't been around before. And so I think that when you combine the two, when you combine the hunger of the young guns with the gray hairs and experience of the older or the more mature demographic, I think that makes for a
Yeah.
really good 1-2 punch combination.
Oh, absolutely. No, when you're young, you think you know everything, and you know next to nothing.
But you learn really quick. That's the thing. If you're good,
Yeah.
you learn really fast.
Yep, that's the way. Is keep learning, keep moving forward, keep changing, looking for new things. I learned Python this last year
Wow.
out of
And
necessity, and
Python is
Mongo.
just so heavily used now that why wouldn't you want to know it?
Yeah, because before I 20 years on Java, Websphere. Hello, it was Java. If we didn't do it if it wasn't Java, so now it's Python, and it's
Well, and of course, even Demandware is a Java platform. So there you go. It's not like Java's dead.
Oh, Java isn't going to die, no. But back in the old days, it was Microsoft or Java. Those are the only two that work. It was a religious battle. It was like Star Wars, good and evil. The evil empire is Microsoft. Java before Oracle bought it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a Sun product, right?
Yes. Sun Microsystems.
Yeah. Wow. I've got lots of stories. When I was much younger, I was part of a local Linux users group. I was one of the first adopters of Linux on the desktop. And we could go on and on about the history of not just ecom, but IT and technology full stop. But when you've seen these patterns and you see them repeating themselves, it gives you a little bit more confidence that you're helping clients go down the right path when you've seen how this movie ends, right? And I guess it helps you to give clients the heads up, helps you to point them in the right direction, helps you to minimize, I guess, project risk is the idea, and help them to increase the odds of success of any digital initiative that they might undertake as a business. Because the reality is digital is a journey. It's not a destination. It's something that will forever be part of your business, and you will always have to evolve. It's not a one and done project. There's no such thing as a one and done project. And so I think if you can help merchants understand that, and you can help them along their journey, then I think you can sleep pretty soundly at night feeling pretty good about yourself.
Oh, yeah. No, it'll never end. Of course, until the robots rise up and take over.
Exactly. Until we submit to our robot overlords. And it's probably coming sooner than we think. Well, Chris, thank you again so much. I appreciate your time, and I can't wait to have another chat with you again in the future, my friend. If you're into B2B commerce and you would like to be a guest on B2B Commerce Corner, simply go to ecommerceedge.net, click on more info, then click on be a guest and fill out your details, and we will get back to you straight away.